guests, Academic Director Sir, Principal Ma'am, teachers and my dear students. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce the astronaut Dr. Donald A. Thomas. He is an American engineer, former NASA astronaut, scientist, professional speaker, educator and author. He has pursued Bachelor of Science in Physics from Case Western Reserve University in 1977, Master's degree and doctorate in Material Science from Cornell University. He holds 2 patents and has authored several technical papers. In 1988, he joined NASA's B. Johnson Space Center as a material engineer. Selected by NASA in Jan 1990, Dr. Thomas became an astronaut in July 1991. A veteran of 4 space flights, he has logged over 1,040 hours in space, spent 44 days and orbited Earth nearly 700 times. Thomas retired from NASA in 2007 in order to pursue his personal interest. Dr. Thomas visits 50 to 100 schools every year and is one of the best at connecting with a wide range of students from preschool children all the way through college. His popular and most frequently requested Living and Working in Space presentation brings the students along with him on his journey to become an astronaut. He allows them to share the fun and excitement of being in space. So far, Dr. Thomas has addressed 30,000 students and we are very happy to be the one and only school in Bangalore to have you with us, sir. We extend our hearty welcome to you, sir. I kindly request Academic Director Sir and Principal Ma'am to welcome our Chief Guest. We extend our hearty welcome to you too, sir. We also extend our hearty welcome to Mr. Shekhar from Go for Guru. Welcome you, sir. My welcome speech by quoting, "Sky is not the limit because there are footprints on the moon." I kindly request our Chief Guest, Dr. Thomas, to address the gathering. The stage is all yours, sir.
Hey, I am so excited to be here. This is my first visit to Bangalore. And guess what school is the very first I speak at? The BGS National Public Schools. So, a round of applause. This is my 3rd visit to India. I've been to Mumbai on 2 previous trips, but I'm very excited to be here with you today. And I want to thank Go for Guru for inviting me to be here. We've been touring 7 or 8 cities across southern India and visiting students all over. And it's been a great opportunity for me. I've always known how beautiful India is from space, but to come here in person and meet the beautiful people of Bangalore and the rest of your country, I know how beautiful your country is down here now. So I'm very thrilled to be here today. Thank you. I flew in space on 4 space shuttle missions, as you heard, spending 44 days in space, and I've been around the Earth almost 700 times. And this morning I will share with you a little bit about what it's like to live and work in space. We'll talk about how we eat and sleep and exercise. I'll show you some of my favorite pictures of the Earth taken from space. and then we'll talk about the landing, and at the end we'll save time for your questions, okay? Sound good? All right, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I have a few questions for you. Does anybody know who this gentleman is? I heard it. Yell it out. Rakesh Sharma, exactly right. The first Indian in space back in 1984. Round of applause. He launched with the Russians and went to their Salyut 7 space station. So the first Indian in space. This one is a little more difficult. Oh, you know her. Okay. There's Kalpana, the first Indian woman in space. And I worked with Kalpana in the astronaut office. We shared an office for about 6 months together. And I always enjoyed working with her. Every time I saw her, she had that beautiful smile on her face. And she always loved talking about flying. We were very proud of her at NASA, as I know you are proud of her as well. How about this one? Sunita Williams, very good. Her father was born in India. Sunita was born in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I was born. And Sunita and I are friends. I've known her for 20 years. And just last month, for the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, Sunita and I were both in Wapakoneta, Ohio, which is the hometown of Neil Armstrong. So I just spent a weekend with her doing programs. And she has flown 2 times up on the International Space Station and spent nearly a full year up in space. And she's getting ready for her 3rd mission. And the next year, she'll be flying up to the space station on one of our new commercial space rockets. Anybody know these gentlemen? This is the crew from Apollo 11. Very good. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon on the far left. He was the commander of the mission. On the far right is Buzz Aldrin, the 2nd human on the moon. And in the middle there is Mike Collins, who was a command module pilot. He stayed in orbit while Armstrong and Aldrin went down to the surface. They launched on July 16th and headed to the moon. And about 2.5 days later, they got in their lunar lander and descended to the surface of the moon. Neil Armstrong, just a few hours later, climbed down the ladder to become the first human to set foot on the moon. And this is a picture Neil Armstrong took of Buzz Aldrin. And if you look in the visor right here, we zoom in, this little white area there, that's Neil Armstrong. That's his reflection taking the picture of Buzz Aldrin. And it's one of the best pictures we have of Neil Armstrong because he was the only one with the camera that day. So all the pictures that you see from this mission are ones that Neil Armstrong took of Buzz Aldrin. And here's our lunar lander, Buzz Aldrin, and here's one of our scientific experiments looking at moonquakes. This is a picture of Neil Armstrong just maybe an hour after they got back inside the lunar lander. You can tell he looks very tired from the moonwalk, but has a smile on his face, like mission accomplished. And then a few hours later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin lifted off the moon, came back into lunar orbit, and docked with the command module with Michael Collins. And a day later, they headed back to Earth, and after an 8-day mission to the moon and back, they landed in the Pacific Ocean, where we were able to recover them. They spent 3 weeks in a quarantine to make sure that they weren't carrying any moon germs that may get everybody on Earth sick. But after that, they went on a world tour, and they visited 35 countries in like 40 days. So they went around the world to celebrate this achievement. You know, it was not just the United States landing on the moon 50 years ago. It was the entire world, all of humanity. And Neil Armstrong said it best, you know, one giant step for mankind. You know, because it was really a human event that we accomplished that day. And Neil Armstrong was one of my heroes as a young boy. I was just 14 years old when he landed on the moon. And I told you he was from the state of Ohio, which is where I'm from. And so always my hero as a young boy. And for my third mission, I wrote him a letter and said, I'm one of the Ohio astronauts, and you were my hero, and I want to invite you to come to my launch to watch me take off from the Kennedy Space Center. He wrote back and said, I'll be there, and the day before launch, I got to spend about an hour one-on-one with Neil Armstrong. So here's Neil Armstrong here on the left. This is his wife, Carol. This young-looking guy there is me 23 years ago. And this is my beautiful wife, Simona. And to spend an hour with Neil Armstrong was one of the highlights of my life. Flying in space was amazing, but it was even greater for me to spend that hour with Neil Armstrong. And here he is the next morning watching my launch. I don't know if you can tell which of us is which here, but that's Neil Armstrong. That's me. That's one of my favorite pictures of Neil Armstrong and I together. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I always wanted to be an astronaut since I was 6 years old. And at that age, the United States launched our first American astronaut into space. And at my elementary school, primary school, they brought us all to our gymnasium, and I sat on the floor just like you're doing, and I watched a small black and white TV of the launch of the first American. And as soon as our astronaut had launched into space, I remember sitting there saying, I want to do that. So ever since I was a little boy, I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to ride a rocket to space. I wanted to experience zero gravity floating around up there. So I always knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure, well, how do you become an astronaut? We only had 7 American astronauts at that time, and I didn't know any of them. But the one thing I recognized early on was it was going to be very difficult. Thousands of people apply, and then only a small handful of astronauts are chosen. So I knew as a young boy, my only chance of ever making it up to space would have to involve me working hard and doing my best in school every single day. And that's what I tried to do. I worked hard every day in math, science, but music, art, history, gym, history, whatever I worked on, I gave it my best effort. After high school, I went on to university, got my bachelor's degree in physics, and that is the minimum degree you need to become an astronaut, a 4-year college degree in math, science, engineering, or the medical field. But again, I knew the competition was going to be tough, so I decided I'm going to stay in university, and I got my master's and my doctorate in engineering. So after 9.5 years of university, I got out, and at this point, I started applying to NASA to become an astronaut. NASA selects new groups of astronauts every 3 or 4 or 5 years. They'll pick a small group of 10 or 15 astronauts. And it was 2 years after I got out of university, NASA put out the announcement. They needed new astronauts. I was all excited. I wrote to them. I got the application form. I carefully filled it out. I mailed it back in. And can you guess what happened? They said no, thank you. I was surprised too. But I didn't give up. I decided I'll try again. 2 years later, another astronaut selection. I sent my application in, and this time, they said no, thank you. You know, I was very disappointed, and at this point I thought, my grandmother and I have the same chance of becoming an astronaut. That chance was 0. I wasn't even getting close in the competition. So I realized I need to do more to get noticed by NASA. And being an engineer, what I did is I studied the data. I carefully looked into the background of the astronauts that were successful getting into the program, and I wanted to see, what do they have that I don't have? What am I missing? What background, what experiences, what education? And by studying that, I learned a few things. The first was, most of the astronauts that they were selecting already had some flying experience. It wasn't a requirement to be an astronaut, but it seemed to help a little bit. So I started taking flying lessons. I got my pilot's license. Most of the astronauts they were selecting had some parachuting or skydiving experience. Again, it wasn't a requirement, but it seemed to help. So I learned to do that. I taught a university course. That seemed to be experience NASA was looking for. So I worked on these activities. 3 years later, another astronaut selection. I sent my application in, and this time NASA called me up, and they invited me down to the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, for a week of medical testing and an interview. And out of the thousands of people that apply to be astronauts, NASA will select 100 individuals. They bring you to Houston, and you spend a full week on a very thorough medical exam, and then there's a 1-hour interview. I passed all the medical tests. I went on to the interview, and that went extremely well. And at the end of my week there, I thought that couldn't have gone any better for me. I was pretty excited. And I went back to my job and just sat there and waited to see, did I make it or not? I was back at my job about a week or so when some of my friends started calling me up from across the United States. They called me up and they said, hey Don, the police have been calling about you. And let me tell you, if the police are ever calling about you, it's either really good or really bad, right? In this case, it was really good. NASA was doing a security background check on me, and they looked into my background. They went to all the cities wherever I lived, and they would check the police records. Then they met with all my former bosses, any company that I worked for. They would go and meet with them and ask, what kind of worker was Don? Did he show up to work on time? How did he treat the customers? And then they went up and down the streets in any neighborhood, wherever I lived, talking to the neighbors, asking, what kind of person was I? How did I treat people in the neighborhood? And when I heard this was going on, I thought this is a great sign. I did not think that NASA could be doing this detailed security check on all 100 people they interviewed. And I thought they must have selected their astronauts, and this is the final security check to make sure you're good to go before they announce the names. So I was pretty excited, and it was just 2 months later I got the phone call from NASA. They called me up and said, Don, thank you very much for applying. We had a lot of good candidates. We did not select you, but good luck in the future. And I hung up that phone and I was in shock. I thought I had made it into the program, but here for the third time, NASA said no. So at this point I decided, it's time to give up on this silly dream of mine, right? I gave it my best effort, I worked hard, I applied 3 times, but NASA just didn't want me. So I decided I would go to bed, get a good night's sleep, and then in the morning I would put together a new plan for my career that did not involve being an astronaut. I went to bed that night. The next morning when I woke up, the very first thought that popped into my head was, I still want to be an astronaut. So I asked myself, are there any more of these little things that I can do to improve my background, to make myself a better candidate? And by studying who NASA was selecting and who they weren't selecting, it was pretty clear most of the people they were picking were individuals that were already working at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. So I quit my job, I moved down there, I got a job with NASA as an engineer on the Space Shuttle program. I did that for 3 years. Then there was another astronaut selection. I sent my application in, I got called up for the medical testing and the interviews, and that all went very well. And then about 3 months later, I got another phone call from NASA. And this time they called and said, Don, are you still interested in being an astronaut? Because we'd like to offer you the job. I said yes, I hung up the phone, and for the next 10 minutes I was jumping up and down, yelling and screaming because I knew I made it into the program. So the number one lesson I've learned in my life is to never give up, okay? You all have dreams for your future, big dreams and smaller dreams. Never give up on your dreams. I almost gave up on my dream the 3rd time I was turned down. And had I given up, I wouldn't be here today sharing with you these experiences. So it takes hard work, right? It takes time to get there. I was 39 years old the first time I went to space. 39 is like an old man, right? Yes or no? No? You are a very polite audience here. I love Bangalore. Yeah. But some of the careers you will pick, it will take time to get there. So work hard, do your best every single day, and never, never give up on your dream inside. And I went from this little boy just dreaming of going into space to getting assigned on 4 space shuttle missions. This is the crew from my last flight, and the last time I was in space was 22 years ago already. We've got 2 military pilots in the front row with the helmets that help us fly the shuttle. On the left-hand side with the helmet is our commander. His name is Jim Halsell. He was an Air Force test pilot. Our pilot on the mission right here is Susan Still. And Susan is a pretty unique individual. She's only the second woman to pilot the space shuttle. And Susan is one of my country's top Navy fighter pilots. So it was a great opportunity for me to fly with Susan on this flight. And then we have 5 of our science astronauts. We're called mission specialists. We do the science on board, we deploy satellites and do spacewalks. We each have our area of specialty on the crew. You probably don't recognize that young-looking guy right there, but that's me 22 years ago. There's a space shuttle on the launch pad. I took this picture the night before my first mission. Went out there about midnight or so. And it was pretty amazing just to stand there right at the base here, space shuttle all lit up with those bright lights against a pitch black sky. And as I stood there looking up at it, I had butterflies in my stomach, right? I was a little bit nervous, a little piece of me was scared, but my main emotion was one of great excitement because I knew 12 hours from when I'm taking this picture, I'm going to be sitting right inside there blasting off. I almost couldn't believe where I was and what I was about to do. So on launch morning, they bring us out here about 3 hours before liftoff. We take a lift up the side, walk across a little bridge, and there's a round door or hatch where we climb inside. There I am in my launch suit, just standing there waiting. When it's my turn to enter the space shuttle, they'll call my name. I'll turn that corner, walk down that bridge, and at the end of it there is the round hatch. Before I climb inside, these 2 gentlemen in the white suits will help me put on a parachute. We'll get the helmet on, gloves on. Then I get on my hands and knees, crawl on that white board, and there's people to help strap us into our seats. We're laying down on our backs for liftoff. We've got shoulder harnesses and seat belts. They strap us in good and tight because there's a lot of shaking and vibration during launch. Once we're all strapped in, they close and seal that side door. Then everybody moves away from us about 5 kilometers, and it gets very quiet inside the space shuttle up until 6 seconds before liftoff. At that point, 3 big engines at the tail of the shuttle start coming up to full power. And 6 seconds later, we light these big white side rockets called solid rocket boosters. And the instant they light, boom, immediately you take off. And laying on my back in my seat, I could hear the roar of the engines. I could feel the shaking and vibration going on. And right at the moment of liftoff, I felt a push in my back. And it felt to me as if somebody had their hand right in the middle of my back, and they were just pushing me up into the sky. And that's what the space shuttle's doing, literally pushing us, tossing us up in the air. This picture is taken 4 seconds after liftoff. We're going 200 kilometers an hour already. 8.5 minutes later, the engine shut down. It's perfectly quiet for a second, and we're in space. It only takes 8.5 minutes to get to space. That was always amazing to me. I bet it takes some of you more than 8.5 minutes to get to school every morning, right? And in that short period of time, think about it, you could end up being 300 kilometers above the Earth, and at this point we're traveling at a speed of 28,000 kilometers an hour. That turns out to be 7 kilometers a second. So imagine how fast you could get home today if you travel 7 kilometers a second. Most of you would be home maybe 2 or 3 seconds. Or if you live far from here, maybe it would take 5 or 6 seconds. And we go so fast that we go around the Earth, we go all the way around in only an hour and a half. On 3 of my missions, we had a science laboratory in the back of the shuttle. Once we got to space, we would float back there, work on different science experiments. So there I am with another one of the astronauts. And during a 2-week space shuttle mission, we typically work on 100 to 200 different experiments, all of them looking into the effects of zero gravity. We did a lot of experiments on looking at how fires burn in zero gravity. You're all familiar with the shape of a candle flame. A flame comes up to a point here on Earth because hot air arises, and it draws that flame up to a point. In space, without gravity, hot air doesn't rise. So instead of a flame coming up to a point, in space, the flame will burn perfectly round. And what you're looking at in this picture is a little pink droplet there of butane fuel. It's like what we have in a disposable lighter. And we've set it on fire, and that blue ball or halo you see there is a flame burning. And it'll just float in the air. It'll burn perfectly spherical. It'll consume all the oxygen around itself, and the flame will go out all on its own. So we study a lot of effects in space where we can experience zero gravity. We do a lot of biology and life science experiments. This is an experiment with a salamander here. It would lay eggs. We'd put the eggs in little chambers and just watch how they grow and develop in zero gravity as well. So we study animals and plants, how they grow. We take liquids up there, fires. Almost every field of science, we're doing experiments under zero gravity conditions. This is Chaki Mukai. She's the first Japanese woman in space. And I flew with her on my first mission. And in space, you don't walk around like we're used to doing here on Earth. When you want to move around in space, it just takes a little push with your finger, and you go sailing through the air like Superman or Superwoman. And you'll keep sailing until you hit a wall or until you reach out to stop your motion. If you like doing a somersault, you can start flipping in the air. And you go round and round all day until you get tired and you reach out to stop yourself. So what do you think? Does it sound like fun up there? Yes. We have a blast. It's a lot of fun floating in space. Here's Susan, our pilot, and she's typing on a laptop computer right there. And I want to point out one feature. If you look at her toes, she's got her toes hooked on that vertical gold pole there. If she didn't do that with her toes, every time she'd hit the keyboard on the computer, what do you think might happen? She'd go bouncing off, right? It's one of Newton's laws. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But if she just pinches that a little bit with her toes, she can stay in position, float in the air, and type on the computer all day long. And in space, there's no up or down. I think we pretty much agree which way is up and which way is down here today. In space, there is no up or down. And you know here on Earth, if you stand on your head, all the blood rushes to your head because of gravity. In space, that doesn't happen. And in space, wherever your head is pointed, that direction is up for you. Wherever your feet are pointed, that's down. So this is Nancy and Kevin on my second flight. Nancy's looking at Kevin saying, "Hey, Kevin, you're upside down." Well, Kevin's looking right back at her saying, "No, you're upside down." In his little world there, she's the one that appears to be upside down. If we were in space right now, I could slowly push off. I could float up above you there and sit down up there. That would become my new floor, and I would be looking up at all of you here today saying you're all sitting on the ceiling. And you'd be looking up at me saying, "You crazy American, you're up on the ceiling." So however you orient yourself, wherever your head is pointed, that direction is up for you. You never feel like you're upside down, it's everybody else in the room. Now in space, we don't have a refrigerator or freezer, so most of our food is freeze-dried. So it's cooked food. They remove all the moisture and they package it in little small plastic bags like I have here. Very hard, dry food. But once we get to space, a needle will poke into that package. We can inject hot water. That dry, hard food will absorb that water, soften up, and after a few minutes it's ready to eat. We would just cut this open with a pair of scissors and eat it with a normal fork or spoon. All the food has a little dot of Velcro on it, and after we make a meal, we can just Velcro it to ourselves. You can float to a window, and you watch the Earth go by, and you have your lunch or dinner right there. How convenient is that? We don't use a dinner plate, because what do you think would happen in space? It's just going to float away. So everything has Velcro. We can stick it to ourselves, stick it up on the wall. Now drinking is a little different in space as well. You can't drink out of a glass or a bottle like we're used to doing here on Earth. If I had this bottle of water in space, I could take the top off, tip it upside down to get a drink, and nothing would happen. Without gravity, the liquid's not going to fall or pour out of the bottle. So we can't drink out of a glass or bottle, and instead we drink out of foil pouches like I have here. This is a little bag of powdered orange juice. We've got powdered coffee, powdered tea. The needle comes in here. We can inject the water You mixed up the powder with your fingers, you poke a straw in there, and you squeeze it into your mouth. Just like a juice box or juice bag you may have in your lunch some days here. That's exactly how we drink in space. In this picture, I've got a bag of tropical punch that you see here. You can see the red straw maybe with some of the juice in it. And I've squeezed the bag of punch and some of the juice got away from me. And what looks like a little red golf ball in front of my face is actually a blob of tropical punch. Any liquid in space forms a perfectly round ball. It's from a force we call surface tension. It drives it into a sphere. You can go up to it and gobble it up. Our more polite astronauts will take a straw, you can poke it in there and drink that, and you'll see it get smaller and smaller and smaller and disappear. Sleeping's a little different in space. The inside of the space shuttle is very small, maybe the size of your kitchen at home, and we did not have dedicated bedrooms. So when it's time to go to bed, we take a sleeping bag, attach it to the wall, then you just float up there, slip inside, zip it up, and you go to bed. We wear the dark eye shades that you see in this picture because we go around the Earth every hour and a half. We get 45 minutes of daytime, 45 minutes of nighttime. If you don't want the sun coming in your eyes all the time, you need to wear the eye shades. And you see how our astronaut has his arms crossed like this? Here on Earth, with gravity, if I totally relax, my arms are going to fall to my side. But in space, if you totally relax, the arms tend to come up and float right in front of you like this. So can you imagine you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes, and the first thing you see are two hands floating in front of your face? Our astronauts are not that brave, so we tuck our arms in. And the real reason we do it, if you look on the right-hand side, there's a lot of cables and switches. You don't want your arm in the middle of the night floating over there, doing some damage. So we try to get nice and secure like you see here. Now for cleaning up in space, we don't have a bathtub, we don't have a shower, we don't even have a sink like you have in your kitchen or bathroom at home. So when it comes time to clean up, we have some of these drink bags that I showed you, and instead of having powdered juice in these, a few of them will have powdered soap. We can add hot water, mix up a bag of hot soapy water, put it on a washcloth or a sponge, and give yourself a sponge bath. That's how we clean up in space. For washing our hair, we've got a special shampoo that you see here. It's called No Rinse Shampoo. And this was developed for people in the hospital who can't get out of bed to take a shower. And it's very easy to use, doesn't require any water. All you do is put some of the shampoo in your hair, you work up a lather, and then you take a towel and you pat it dry and you're done. I took this picture. I love the bottom line on the bottle right there. It's a little hard to read, but it says, "For beautifully clean, full-bodied hair." And I want to share with you what that looks like in space. That's Susan, our pilot. Anybody with long hair, it's going to float all over. I'm not picking on Susan here. Even my short hair floats all over. We say that every day in space is a bad hair day, and that's pretty accurate. I wanted to share with you the granddaddy of all bad hair days in space. Are you ready for this one? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. All right, you better hold on. This is Marcia Ivins. She flew on 5 space shuttle missions, had really long hair, as you see. She wouldn't leave it like this normally, otherwise for the rest of us it'd be like scuba diving through seaweed. She just put it in a ponytail, but did this for the picture. Exercise is very important in space. As I stand up here in front of you today, I'm using my leg muscles to walk around, to fight gravity, but in space it's a little push with my finger and I sail through the air. And everything is weightless in space. I can lift your podium here with one finger in space. I can lift your car with one finger. So we don't use our muscles, and it's very important to exercise. We had a bicycle we'd ride up there every day for about 45 minutes. We'd get your heart muscle working, get your leg muscles working, so when you come back to Earth at the end of the mission, you're still in good shape. You know what this is? Should we skip this? You don't want to hear about this, right? You want to hear about it? We visited 6 or 7 other schools this week and last week, and they all voted me down. Are you sure you want to hear about? Yes. This is a great school we got today. Okay. This is the toilet on board the space shuttle. It's in a very small closet, similar to an airline toilet. And we've got a curtain that goes across the front like a shower curtain for privacy. And it's got a white toilet seat there like our toilets on Earth. But here on Earth, we use gravity to collect the waste material, right? So what do you think might happen in space? We're not going to talk about that here today. But this toilet is like a porta potty or portaloo. Maybe you see it at a construction site. And in the bowl part of the toilet there, we have giant fans. And to activate the toilet, there's a little white knob off to the side. You push that forward, it activates the fans and it sucks air from the toilet seat downward. So we use that down rush of air to act like gravity to keep all the waste material down. That's the secret to the space toilet. I'll wrap it up by showing you some pictures of the Earth. And whenever an astronaut has a free moment, we would float to the window to watch the Earth go by. I've got a map in my hand. I'm trying to figure out where we are around planet Earth. And I'm looking out one of the windows towards the tail end of the space shuttle. And I took a camera up to that window, I pressed it against the glass, and I took a picture so you can see exactly what my eyes are seeing. And this is the view I see out the back. So that's a beautiful blue Earth from 300 kilometers above. All the blue in the background is the Pacific Ocean. These white areas are puffy clouds. This is Baja California, part of Mexico. And you have to look very carefully, but at the bottom edge of the Earth, you may see a little thin blue line. I don't know if you can see that today. Any guess as to what that blue line is? It's our atmosphere. You know, on a nice sunny day like, we have today in Bangalore, you look up at that blue sky, it looks like it goes on forever and ever. From space, we see the atmosphere edge on. And it looks just as you see here, like a paper-thin layer. Most of the air protecting us on planet Earth is in that first 20 or 30 kilometers, and that's about it. Which is why when we pollute the air, it can have such a major impact on our planet. Here's a big hurricane over the Pacific Ocean, about 600 kilometers across. And we flew right over the center of it there. That's called the eye, right? And from 300 kilometers, I could go to the window, look straight down, look right into the eye and see the blue water of the Pacific Ocean. The next picture will show you the eye looking straight into it from directly overhead, right there. That's about maybe 20, 25 kilometers across. Here's a volcano venting steam. This is in the South Pacific near Indonesia. Here's the Himalaya Mountains. And right here at the center is Mount Everest. So that is the very top of Mount Everest. And I can stand up here in front of you and tell you without lying, I have seen the top of Mount Everest with my own eyes about 25 times during my career. I call it the lazy man's way to see the top of Mount Everest, right? Anybody recognize this beautiful part of planet Earth? What do you think?
India.
It's India. It's a really beautiful city in India. There's Bangalore Airport. And it's the Bannerghatta National Park right here. So I think your school may be right about there. Didn't I tell you it was beautiful from space? And here you see a sunrise from space. Because we go around the Earth every hour and a half, we see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every 24-hour day up there. Well, at the end of the mission, it's time to come home. We fire 2 engines from the back of the shuttle, and we begin our fall back to Earth. And about 55 minutes later, we end up landing back at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, in the southeast United States. We touch down like an airplane. We deploy this drag parachute out the back to help slow us down. And then we just put the brakes on and roll to a stop. And then we just sit and wait for them to open the hatch so we can get out. And when you first come back from space, you feel like you weigh about 1,000 kilograms because you've been floating around in space for 2 weeks. And then suddenly you come back to this pull of gravity. Just a normal pull we feel in here today, but it felt so heavy. My arms were heavy, my legs were heavy, I was a little dizzy when I got back. And it took a day or so for that dizziness to go away, maybe a week or so to get your muscle strength back, and then you were pretty much back to normal. So this picture was taken 2 hours after I landed on my first flight. That's me here on the left. And after we took this picture, I turned around and I looked up at the word Columbia there. And I was just staring back at my space shuttle thinking, what an amazing vehicle this space shuttle is. You know, this was my house in space for 2 weeks. This thing protected me from that fiery reentry coming in through the atmosphere. And then one of the next thoughts that popped into my head was, I gotta do this again. And it's like going on a fun roller coaster ride. Maybe you get off of it, you run around the back of the line and do it again immediately. Does anybody else do that or just me? Yeah, I do that all the time. And that's exactly how I felt. As soon as I landed, I knew I wanted to do this again, and I went on to fly a total of 4 times to space. So that is a little bit about living and working in space. Should we see if they have any questions here today? You think that's possible? I don't know if they have any questions. I don't think they would here. Any questions?
What are the health conditions which you require before going to space? Like you said, the medical testing before you get selected.
Yeah, you know, to be selected, they put us through a really thorough medical exam. You know, it's a little more than our airline pilots have to go through. They're checking our vision, our hearing, your heart, everything about you. They're doing testing on it. And then once you become an astronaut, you have to pass that physical every year. And before you fly, the doctors are the last person we see on launch morning. They're doing one more check on us. So you can wear glasses. You can tell I wear glasses today. You don't see them in the pictures. So you don't have to be perfect. Almost every astronaut has some little flaw. We all do, right? So you don't have to be perfect to fly in space, but you can't have any major, you know, heart problems. Maybe your blood's got to be good. You just have to be in good general shape, good lungs. So it's important exercise, right? Every day to stay in shape. Okay?
So what are the alloys or metals which are used in the space shuttle?
The space shuttle is mainly made out of aluminium, similar to an airline. You know, different alloys of that, but mainly aluminium. We have some composite materials, graphite, epoxy composites, in some of the newer space shuttles that were built because they're lighter weight and a little bit stronger. But almost all of the space shuttle, if you looked underneath, it would look similar to an airplane, aluminium.
So what were the experiments you were doing in the space shuttle? So like, as you told, you are an engineer, right? So what were the experiments you performed in space?
So the ones I performed, they had me work on many different experiments. But my background is in engineering, and I worked on crystal growth. So we were growing crystals of silicon and other electronic devices because we can have more perfect crystals, fewer defects in them, that give you higher computer speeds. So I worked on those, but they also had me working on goldfish and the salamander and fires and liquids. So even though I have a specialty in science, they train us to work on all the experiments. Because as a trained scientist, you're a good observer. And even if I'm looking at goldfish or jellyfish, you know, I'm a good scientist. I'm going to describe what I'm seeing and notice things and tell them to the scientists down on Earth. So I worked on many different experiments up there. That was a good question. Thank you. Can we get one right here? Oh, go ahead. I'll get you
Hello,
first.
sir. My name is Abhinav. Okay, so my question is that other than cycling, is there any other exercise which you perform in space?
Great question. On my space shuttle missions, we had the bicycle. That was all. Today, up on the International Space Station, because our astronauts live up there for 6 months at a time, exercise is even more important. So they exercise 2 to 3 hours every day. They have a bicycle. They also have a treadmill. And you can't run on a normal treadmill because if I stepped on it, I would bounce off. So they have a treadmill with springs that pull the astronaut down onto the surface so that they can run. And then we have some resistive exercise, some weights. They're not free weights because I can lift them with my finger. So it's a bar kind of tied to springs and pulleys. So the astronauts can do resistive exercise. And that exercise is very important to keep your bones strong. In space, without any force on your bones, they get weaker. And doing these exercises help us keep our bones strong in space. So yes, we got many different exercises that we do up there on the International Space Station.
Good morning, sir. My name is Manasa and I have a question. So what is microgravity? I've heard a lot about it, but what is it exactly?
Microgravity, we used to say zero gravity in space. So we're actually in a state of free fall. We're falling around the planet Earth. It's like I take a baseball, I throw it up in the air. It's in a state of free fall until it hits the Earth. But when we're in space, we're in an orbit. So we're continuously falling around the Earth. So we call it zero gravity. We still have gravity acting on us. If we stopped our speed, we immediately fall straight down to Earth. And microgravity is a term we use, it's more scientifically correct. As we orbit the Earth, we get about 1/1,000,000th the gravity level here on Earth. Because there's still some residual atmosphere, a little bit of drag on the space shuttle when we're up in space. So it's not perfectly zero gravity. It's 1/1,000,000th the gravity level. We can't detect that, but we call that microgravity. Okay? Thank you for that question. Where are we? Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. I'm Nandana Nair. So, as you mentioned in the beginning, that during the mission, just before that, you were a bit nervous and scared. So, how did you overcome the fear and build up the courage to go for the mission?
I think we're all scared many times in our lives. Maybe before a big test or exam, you feel a little scared or nervous about it. What helped me was I was fully prepared for the mission. We trained for 4 years for my first flight. So come launch morning, I want to go. I'm very excited about it. This is something I've dreamed since I was a young boy to do. And we also meet the workers who work in the space program, and they are some of the best, to prepare the space shuttle, get them ready for launch. Just like your engineers and scientists at ISRO, getting ready for Chandrayaan-2 to land on the moon. You've got some of the best engineers and scientists working on that program. So when the landing comes, you have confidence that the team did a good job. So it's always a little piece of me scared, but most of me very excited. Thank you for that great question. Go ahead.
Good morning, my name is Vinayak. So, we have observed that there are a lot of glasses on the space shuttles and all. So, what type of glasses are these that they resist when there is no gravitation and there is air pressure inside the shuttle, right?
Yeah.
How thick or how strong should the glasses be?
Yeah, these are really great questions. I think we have a lot of great engineers and scientists here. That's a great question. The glass on the shuttle is made out of a special quartz glass material. And we have 3 layers of glass in each window. The total thickness is maybe 6-7 centimeters. And we have 3 layers of glass. The outermost layer can withstand the heat of reentry, of coming back. And then we have 2 layers that are better for taking the pressure inside the shuttle. So if one piece of glass breaks, not a problem. We still have 2 good pieces. If 2 pieces of glass break, we're still okay. We still have the 1 layer. If all 3 break, big problem, right? We lose all of our oxygen. So it's a very special glass that can withstand high temperatures coming back to Earth at the end of the mission. It's called quartz glass. Okay?
Good morning, sir. I wanted to know what kind of entertainment you had in space and how you communicated with others in Earth.
Okay. What kind of entertainment did we have in space? I'm sorry to tell you we did not have internet up there 25 years ago when I flew. So what we would do, most of the time, whenever I had a free moment, I would look at the Earth. That was incredible entertainment. But we also sometimes, the astronauts, goof around. Do you know that term, goof around? Do you ever goof around? I should be asking your teachers. Do they ever goof around in school? They do? Well, we do that as astronauts. And what we like to do sometimes in space, we play catch. You ever play catch? What do you use? A ball. Well, we don't have anything like that. So what we do, we have one of the astronauts will tuck themselves into a ball, and then 2 of us can play catch with that person. It's very funny to watch that back and forth. So up on the International Space Station, our astronauts live up there today for 6 months at a time. And there you see a picture of the space station. And they have like DVDs, they'll watch movies up there. And they have other entertainment. They've got books that they can bring up there. And today on the space station, we have an internet Skype type telephone. So the astronauts can call their friends, they can call their family members every day if they want to from space. So it's a better way to stay connected. 25 years ago, we didn't have that when I was up on the space shuttle. Thank you for that question.
Which one was your favorite venture?
What?
Like, which one was your favorite venture?
My favorite mission? You know, my first mission, I think the first mission for each astronaut is the most memorable one because it was the first time I launched, the first time I saw the Earth. It's the most memorable, but you asked me my favorite mission, and my favorite would have to be my second flight. And what happened on my second flight that made it my favorite is 1 week before our scheduled launch, a woodpecker attacked our space shuttle. And this one single woodpecker drilled 205 holes in our big orange fuel tank. And it delayed our mission 1 month because NASA had to repair all the damage. And because of that, we became known as the Woodpecker Crew. Sadly, this is how I'm famous. But we had a lot of good woodpecker jokes during the mission, and that was my favorite flight. That was back in 1995, so about 24 years ago.
Good morning, sir. I'm San.
Up in space, so if we had something like this pole here, this railing, they would make sure there are no sharp edges. So everything up in space, we make sure that it's as safe as we can be. Scissors, they give us pointed scissors. They trust us with that. And we need those to open up our food packages. But things like knives, we have equipment up there that we can use, but you just have to be very careful. But during a spacewalk, the outside of the space station or a space shuttle, they make sure there are no sharp edges. Because if I came up and bumped it with my spacesuit or my glove, I can puncture a hole in there. So we're very cautious about sharp edges. You know, this railing here has got a little cap over the end. And that is safe. Over here, it's open. You could cut yourself maybe. So NASA would be very careful looking for things like that to make sure it's very safe. Okay?
Good morning, sir. And I have a question for you. What is your spacesuit made of?
The spacesuits are made out of maybe 18 different layers of material. The inner layer of the spacesuit is made out of a rubberized fabric. So it's like a balloon. And the purpose of that layer is just to keep the air from leaking out. So we have a rubber layer. We have got different layers of material that help prevent little tiny meteorites from puncturing your suit. So a few aluminum sheets. There's a cooling layer for the astronauts. The outer layer is made out of a flame retardant material to protect the astronauts if there's a fire. So there are many, many different layers to help protect us from the heat and cold of space, help protect us from small meteorites, and to help make sure the air does not leak out. Very complicated spacesuits.
Good morning, sir. What if you get wounded in space?
If you get wounded or if you get sick up in space, some of our astronauts are medical doctors. So sometimes you'll have a medical doctor on your crew. Shaki Mukai, the first Japanese woman I told you about, she was a heart surgeon from Tokyo. So we had a doctor if somebody should get sick or injured. If you do not have a doctor on your crew, then they train two of us to be what we call the medical officer. And I'm trained to give shots, do stitches, start IVs. I've been trained to pull teeth. Trust me, you don't want me pulling your teeth. But they give us that training just in case we need it in an emergency up there. And if something is very, very serious, then we have to come back to Earth at the end of the mission or early to bring that person back down.
Good morning. So, how do you resolve any technical difficulties in space? Like, suppose anything happens to your spaceship or something like that.
Yeah, when we have technical issues, we've got the team on the ground, mission control, we call them. They're located in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. So we have hundreds of people, thousands of people that work there, and they are there to solve our technical issues. You know, because they have better information than we do sometimes. They have all the data coming down from the spacecraft that the astronauts might not have. So we rely on the team on the ground. There's a famous movie called Apollo 13. And one of the missions, as they were going to the moon, they were about halfway to the moon, an oxygen tank exploded, and the astronauts, their lives were threatened. We didn't think they would get back to Earth. But that mission control team, figured out a way to bring them back safely. So the astronauts get all the attention in space, but the real heroes are the people in mission control. Just like your mission control that will be working when Chandrayaan-2 lands on the south pole of the moon on Saturday, you don't see a lot about them, but there's some really great people working behind the scenes to make sure it all works perfectly. Okay.
So what I want to ask is, sometimes people write in space, right? With a pen. So how do you write? In pen is something like the gel and floats. How do you write?
Yeah. So with the pen, if you take a regular pen on Earth and you write upside down, it'll dry out. The ink isn't getting to the tip of the pen. So NASA has special pens. They have an ink cartridge that's pressurized with nitrogen, and it forces the ink out. So you can write upside down with those pens. So they work in space. We also have pencils up there, or markers. They all work in zero gravity as well. It's a great question.
This is the last question to you, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. My name is Reentry. I needed to ask you, what are the protocols if there is an opening in the spacecraft or something?
If there's an opening and we're losing our oxygen, yeah, if there's an opening in the spacecraft, maybe some object hits us and creates a hole. If it's a very small hole, we're going to have to get back to Earth. Because maybe we can patch it, maybe it's behind some panels that we can't even get to, so we may not be able to repair it. The first sign that you have a hole would be the pressure starts dropping, and your ears will pop, like when you go on an airplane. That would be the first indication. So we're very cautious with that. As soon as we have a leak, we try to calculate how big is the leak and how much time do we have before we run out of oxygen. And that tells us how much time we have to get back on Earth. So we don't have many good ways to patch up the spacecraft. But it's fortunately a very low probability, very small chance of getting hit by something. Okay?
In Bangalore, we have hundreds of schools, top international schools, 100 maybe. But when I talked about this NASA student program, and when I tried to contact all the top schools in the city, the first person who responded is Dr. Ayyappan Nair, sir. Because only few people can recognize the value of this program and meeting NASA student with the students, because it is a motivating thing. He talked about, he tried a lot of times, 3 times he failed to join NASA. Finally, he joined NASA. So the message is never quit, and you have to try again and again. So that's a great thing. So I thank our academic director, sir, and the principal ma'am for this wonderful opportunity and this quick event they organized for us. So that's a wonderful thing. Then another thing is that Dr. Don Thomas, he landed in Bangalore just today morning 2 o'clock, early morning 2 o'clock. And he was so tired. I asked him, sir, shall you postpone the program? I can talk to academic director and principal. I tried to postpone just 1 hour. You please take rest. He said, no, don't do anything. And so I love to meet students. We will be there on time. So he's this kind of person who loves students. He got energy after meeting you guys. Thank you, Dr. Don. I know your school is a great school, not only academic but also encouraging in all other activities like leadership quality training or other competitions. Because last year when we were conducting 2018 International Space Science Competition, we did it nationwide. Then we selected a few students from India, and we then conducted an International Space Science Competition in NASA Kennedy Space Center. And NASA students announced a topic over there. Instantly they have to write the essay competition, and we selected 5 winners, and 1 winner is from your school, BGS NPS school, Vishwa. Yeah, he's the person who won in 2018 International Space Science Competition, and the benefit is he's going to get a scholarship from Florida Institute of Technology, $10,000 per year. So after his 12th grade, he is eligible for $10,000 per year. So for all the 4 years of $40,000, he will get it. He's such a wonderful boy and very brilliant in the science side. It's like we are like a family because we spent around 10 days over there, and I'm so happy now we are in the right school, BGS National Public School today. And also, every year we are conducting this International Space Science Competition. So with the Vishwa, a group of students, they came over there 2019, already it's done. And winners are coming in the month of October. October 1st, they are leaving Bangalore. And they are coming over there all over India. And we are conducting October 4th in Kennedy Space Center with the international students. This 2019 competition students from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Dubai, they are all going to participate over there, and we are again selecting for this year also 5 students. So for next year, so that is done actually, nationwide, international, everything is ready to go. We are done with the visas also. For 2020 International Space Science Competition, we already started, and it is in online. You can visit our website, GoFaGuru, G-O, 4, I will also inform ma'am about our company, all the details, so you can know our website and you can take the online test. So it is easy to go, objective type questions and paragraph questions. Again, we are selecting this time 6 winners from India, and they are going to compete with the students from Malaysia, Singapore. We are also selecting 6 students from each country. They are all going to meet over there in Kennedy Space Center in May 2020. So we are expecting you guys to please register. And we are sponsoring 100% of all the winners. So please visit our website at gofaguru.com for this International Space Science Competition. Now I request Vishwa to share his experience when he came for the, in Kennedy Space Center, International Competition.
Hello guys, my name is Vishwa Kumaresh and I'm in 11th standard. So as I have spoken in the beginning of the year, that this was a wonderful opportunity, and the best part about this is that it's open for all the students. Anyone from 6th through 12th grade can take this opportunity, and once you qualified, as sir said, you'll be sponsored completely. So you'll be able to go there and visit great NASA astronauts like Dr. Don, and you will also be able to you will be able to visit the NASA space centers. Overall, it's a very wonderful experience, and I request everyone from 6th to 12th, I request everyone to take this opportunity this year, so that you have a chance to visit the US.
Thank you so much, Vishwa. When you are visiting NASA, when you are visiting NASA, you will see the real space shuttle. Atlantis space shuttle you will see over there. Also, you are going to see the launching pads. More than 150 launching pads are over there in Kennedy Space Center. You are going to see. Also, you are going to meet the astronaut during the Lunch with Astronaut program. Also, astronaut encounter program. And also, you can see the recent movies about space. For example, last time we have seen Beautiful Planet. About Earth, we have seen a wonderful movie over there. So it's a great opportunity. So I ask all students, so please, as Vishwa said, so please take that International Space Science Competition. Thank you, Vishwa. Thank you so much again, Dr. Don, Academy Director of Principal. Thank you.
No one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. With this quote by Arthur, I, Deepika Bhargav, would like to express my gratitude to you, sir, Dr. Don Thomas, for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing our experiences with us. Trust me, all of us were hooked to your story. We felt like we were out there in space with you as you went on with your journey, inspiring every one of us to undertake this adventurous ride to the space. Sir, you are a hero to us, the same way Neil Armstrong was a hero to you. I will never forget this memorable day, the day when most of us had the first chance to meet an astronaut. In the end, thank you so much for patiently answering all our questions and keeping our curiosity alive. Thank you for not only sharing your life in space, but also teaching us some great life lessons like never giving up on our dreams, however big or small they might be. I would like to thank Mr. Kayumbu, CEO of Go for Guru, for bringing him here. I would also like to thank the school management for giving all of us this wonderful opportunity today. I would like to end by sharing one of my favorite quotes by Neil Armstrong. Mystery creates wonder, and wonder is the basis of man's desire to understand. Thank you.